Lesson 1.1 Peopling the Americas and Lesson 1.2 Native American Societies around 1492. The first people in the Americas may have arrived 22,000 years ago. Ice Age glaciers had frozen vast amounts of water. This lowered sea levels enough to expose a land bridge between Asia and Alaska called Beringia. Ancient hunters came across the land bridge from Asia to Alaska. These early people most likely hunted large animals. Over thousands of years, these people spread out across North and South America. Changes occurred when the Ice Age ended around 12,000 to 10,000 years ago. The sea once again covered the land bridge. People no longer came to the Americas across this bridge. The climate grew warmer. Large animals began to disappear and people switched to hunting smaller animals. They also began to fish and to gather nuts and berries. Many groups of people settled in North America. Other groups continued south into present-day Mexico and South America. Wherever these people settled, they adapted to the environment in which they lived. Between 10,000 and 5,000 years ago, or 3,000 to 800 BC, people living in Mexico discovered a new way to get food. They began to raise plants or to farm. They first grew maize, a corn-like crop. Soon they raised other crops, like potatoes and squash. The practice of farming spread throughout the Americas. People who farmed no longer had to search for plant foods. They could stay in one place. They had more time to learn new skills and to build settled communities. In this way, farming made possible the growth of complex cultures. Some Native American groups never gave up their nomadic way of life and continued to move from place to place in search of food and water. Beginning about 3,000 years ago, many advanced Native American civilizations arose. The Olmec peoples began their civilization in Mexico around 1200 BC. They created a thriving civilization in the humid rainforests. Other civilizations influenced by the Olmec appeared after their mysterious collapse around 400 BC. They included the Maya. The Maya built their civilization between 250 and 900 AD. It was located in what is today Guatemala and the Yucatan Peninsula. The Aztec people built their empire in central Mexico in the 1200s. Starting around 1400, the Inca created a large, rich empire. It stretched along the western coast of South America. All of these empires had achievements that were as great as those of other ancient cultures. All had great skills at mining and working precious metals, such as gold and silver. All built great cities or ceremonial centers with huge palaces, pyramids with temples, and central plazas. To record their histories, some of the later groups invented some form of writing that used symbols or images to express words or ideas. In North America, the Hohokam and Anasazi built their civilizations in the desert areas. Both groups settled in the southwest. By 300 BC to 1400 AD, each group had grown large enough to carve out its own civilization. The Hohokam settled in the river valleys in central Arizona. The Anasazi lived in the canyon bottoms of the Four Corner region. This is an area where the present-day states of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. The Adena, Hopewell, and Mississippian civilizations developed east of the Mississippi River. These civilizations were known for large burial and ceremonial mounds. The center of trade was Cahokia, around 20,000 people 1350 AD. Native American people lived in many kinds of settings. The cultures that they developed depended on how they adapted to their environments. For example, the Northwest Coast was made up of ocean, waterways, and forests. The Kwakiutl lived here. The ocean was their source of food. They hunted for whales and seals. They fished for salmon. The Kwakiutl used the trees from the forests to make totem poles. The Pueblo people lived in the dry southwest, today's Arizona and New Mexico. They built adobe houses. They grew corn and beans. Forests made up the eastern woodlands. This region stretched from the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River in the north to the Gulf of Mexico in the south. Native Americans who lived in the colder northeast depended on hunting. Those who lived in the warmer southeast depended more on farming. The Iroquois lived in the forests of the northeast, today's New York State. They hunted, fished, and gathered fruits and nuts. Although Native American societies had many differences, they did share certain cultural traits. These traits included trade patterns, attitudes toward the land and its use, and some religious and social values. Trade routes across North America brought many Native American peoples into contact with one another. As tribes established permanent settlements, many of these settlements became known for certain products or skills. Elaborate trade routes allowed North American groups that lived far apart to exchange both goods and ideas with one another. All Native American groups respected the land. They thought that it could not be bought or sold. They treated the land as a resource that belonged to all groups. Native Americans changed the land very little. They used it for the most important activities, such as farming. This attitude would lead to clashes with the Europeans who believed in private ownership of the land. Most Native American groups believed that spirits lived in the world. For example, the spirit of a relative who had died might still serve as a guide to the living. Some groups believed in one spirit as the most powerful being. The family was the basic unit. Native Americans had strong feelings of kinship or family ties. Older family members were valued. They passed on their knowledge to the younger family members. In exchange, the young honored their elders and departed ancestors. Most Native American groups practiced a division of labor. In this system, different jobs were assigned. The type of work someone did depended on gender, age, or social position. For example, women tended to both care for crops as well as children. The basic unit of organization among all Native American groups was the family, which included aunts, uncles, cousins, and other relatives. Some tribes also organized the families into clans, or groups of families descended from a common ancestor.